Hey, what's up, guys? So today I'm joined with John Hayes. John is someone that has OCD, ADHD, has an addictive personality, and he's kind of been through it all, really. And so today he's sharing his own personal journey of drink, of drugs, of getting himself in trouble, and basically how he actually turned his life around as well. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope you get a lot from it. If you're someone that is struggling with any mental health issues, make sure you do reach out to someone, because it is really, really important that you do speak to someone. There's so much help out there as well with Pieta House, with Samaritans, and all these other kind of organizations out there. So, guys, hope you enjoyed today's episode, and let's get stuck in. Hey, guys, how we get on today? So today I'm here with John Hayes. So John works in the theatre industry and acting and directing and stuff like that. And John has also been on a bit of a journey as well throughout your whole life with ADHD. So thank you so much for giving your time today to actually coming in and sharing a bit about your own journey, your ups and downs and stuff like that. So so thank you. I suppose just to start off of kind of where you're at now in terms of about the theatre and stuff like that. Sure, a little bit about that.
I was working on a couple of projects last year, and they were taking up a lot of my time. And I suppose because I have been going on a kind of very much a journey of personal development over the past year and a half, just relating to stuff from my childhood, relating to trauma and kind of stuff like that. So I think one of the realizations that I had made via that was because I had discovered at a certain point that I had this creative streak, and that people were, with the acting initially, and people were telling me that I was good at it. I thought that was what I was supposed to be doing, you know. So I think because ultimately, I suppose we'll probably talk about this in a few minutes, back then, there was a complete lack of like self-love, self-esteem and stuff like that. So I had no proper sense of identity. So when you find something that people tell you you're good at, and because I'm obsessed with film and stuff like that, I thought, okay, this is what I should be doing. So I kind of pursued that for years. But it was very much filling a void, the void that I felt as a person, but I didn't realise it back then.
Kind of filling a space, was it?
Yeah,
absolutely. An emptiness or something like that, was it?
Because there was nothing there. I mean, I didn't realise this for years and years and years. It was only in late 2018 I made a realisation about myself and my own past, ironically through watching a TED Talk, that basically the thing that was defining me for a long, long time that I wasn't conscious of was trauma. So when you've no sense of self-love, no sense of identity, if somebody tells you you're good at something and you're passionate about it, that became everything.
Yeah, you just kind of dove straight into that.
Yeah, without even thinking.
Yeah, that was kind of filling the blank space that you had, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that was absolutely everything. And it was almost then I had this kind of like, do you know that kind of destination addiction thing, whereby it's like, oh yeah, I have to have this done by a certain point, I have to do this show, I have to do this project. Became almost addicted to that. But after this realisation I made back late 2018, and I started all this personal development, everything kind of fell into place. I learned self-love, basically. I suppose I'm still dealing with the effects of the trauma. But what I realised was, what I've just stated about the theatre. Yeah. So then I was like, okay, if I'm doing any theatre projects from now on, they're going to be small things, small time. They can't be taking up everything, because I'm so much more than theatre. Theatre project that's going to be like 15-hour days, 7 days a week with 3 hours sleep every night. Which, because of the ADHD, that's fine. Well, it was back then. So I worked on one project in particular last year. And some projects are quite stable when you work on them, and some just aren't. That's just the reality of things. This particular project got incredibly unstable to be working on, and sometimes you can't really avoid that. And it was taking up all my time, and I was getting resentful because it was like because I was on this thing of personal development and I wanted to do other things. This thing became and I know
Kind of took hold, was it?
It took hold of me, but the thing was, I didn't want it to.
Yeah.
And then it was rife with problems, and like, because I was the director and the producer and the writer of the show, it's solely my responsibility to rectify the problems. I can't rely on anybody else to do it, and it wouldn't be fair to expect anybody to do it. So it got very, very unstable in the end, and it just got very toxic within the project, so I left. Because I could feel it getting to my mental health.
Yeah.
And I was getting worried about my own mental health. I mean, I don't mean this in kind of a bitchy way. I mean, it's just the way it was. So I left, and immediately when I left, I felt way, way better. And I was able to think about things that I wanted to do. And
was it like a weight had been lifted off your shoulders when you stuck away?
Yeah, it was just like, people were telling me at the time, you cannot leave your own show. You wrote that show. You can't. One of my friends said, "That's your baby. You can't leave your baby." She goes, "You're a deadbeat dad." I was like, well, I said, I'm fucking leaving it. And I left it, and I immediately felt better. So as it stands, again, with all the personal development I've done, and all the realizations I've made about myself, that I'm much more than the theatre stuff. So I also realised that ultimately, I thought it fulfilled me, but that's because I let it be my entire identity.
Yeah.
So there are other things that I want to do. So as it stands, I have no future plans in directing. The last one was a really bad experience, but also I did it for 10 or 15 years, and because I know in that thing of knowing who I am, knowing my place in the world, and actually loving myself, there's so much more that I want to do. Because I gave up acting years ago, because I had serious self-belief issues with the acting. So I am thinking about maybe going back and trying bits and pieces of that, just to prove to myself now that I have done all that work on myself, that's, just to do it as a kind of a thing of show myself that I can. And I'll definitely continue writing, because I think if anything, I'm probably a better writer than a director. I think that's what people generally think. So, but then I have loads of things that have nothing to do with the arts that I want to do, that I kind of discovered I was interested in once I made that decision just to leave. Yeah. The thing is, like, when you're dealing with an artistic thing, I don't want to sound like I'm attacking anybody. It's when you're dealing with large groups of people, it can be very, very challenging, because everybody, and it's not, to kind of point blame at anyone or anything there, but everybody has their issues. Everybody has their cross to bear. And you hear certain cliches or stereotypes about the artistic thing, which some of them are true. By and large, people are great, but it can just be very, very challenging. And also, when you're leading something, when you're managing something, regardless of whether or not it's your doing, you have to take the shit, because you're the one leading. But I was doing these projects, and I was doing them for nothing. So I was giving my time free, which I know a huge thing with. But when there's constant trouble and constant hassle and constant problem solving, to the point where I ended up getting insomnia. Yeah. I told you about that before. I was in bed one night, and literally anxiety from the bottom of my feet to the top of my head. And I did not sleep for 2 days after that. And I thought, this just is not a way to live. And I'm delighted I made the decision, because it just didn't, I thought it was me at the time, but of course I've only really found out who I am in the past year and a half. So it's kind of like, I bumped into a friend of mine just before Christmas. She's a counsellor. And I said to her, Sonia, it's mad. It actually feels like this past year, it actually feels like I was just born a year ago, if that makes sense.
Kind of refound yourself again, was it? Or?
Not even refound myself, just found myself, for the first time. And it was, so I'm seeing things differently, and I want different things for myself, and things that I'm interested in, I suppose, that I wouldn't have even thought, because I thought so much about the theatre and the creative stuff, and it filled that void. I wasn't thinking in terms of anything else that I might be interested in. And then last year, when I had started all this work on myself and I became conscious of that, I was getting pissed off, because this particular project was taking up so much of my time that I couldn't actually devote any time to the things that I was now interested in, you know? Yeah. So it was kind of, so that, and I mean, a lot of that would have been, I suppose it all goes back to that I suppose that key discovery I made about myself back in late 2018, and that realization, which I obviously had not been conscious of my entire life. And it just kind of all, I think everything in the past year has just kind of emanated from that one central point, you know? Yeah. And
is that when you found out about the ADHD?
No, I found out the ADHD when I was, this is going to be a really long story, I found out all the different elements, and with me going off on tangents as well, like, I found about the ADHD was I applied to study law. Me of all people, fucking hell. When I was younger, would have been more likely the person on the opposite side of it rather than the actual the lawyer. But I applied to study law in UCC, and miraculously I got it. No, I had suspected. So I was 38 when I got that. So when I started, I had suspected. I kind of knew that I had ADHD for a couple of years before, but when you're working in theatre and you get hyper focus and things like that, that's like a secret weapon. So, but I was like going in, I was like, ooh, this is, we'll call it academic stuff here now. Yeah. Like, means I'm getting, no, I just knew that was going to be a problem. I was like, fucking hell, there's no. So, because all the services were available in the university, I thought, look, I'd see if officially if I have it. So I did a screening, and it overwhelmingly indicated that I had it. And I was like, well, I just laughed. I said, yeah, well, there's no surprise there. But what happened then was, so this was the first semester, I could not get the supports from the university at the time because I didn't have the formal diagnosis. Yeah. So if I had to do it through the university, it would have taken a few months. And I was like, well, like, I'm struggling here. I have these, massive challenges academically. Oh, it was insane. And of course, because you now consciously know you have it, and even if you don't have ADHD, going into something completely new at that stage of your life, at any stage in your life, is incredibly overwhelming. So I basically ended up, I was being a bit of a pain in the arse with the university as I can be, saying, look, you cannot let me there doing all this stuff without any supports, because that's insane. So in the end, they kind of, they randomly gave me one or two, but by that point I decided it was the Mature Students Office in UCC. They were amazing. I got this thing called the Student Assistance Fund. Went down to Tralee, where I'm from, just before Christmas, and I got my formal diagnosis. So then I was able to get, in the new year, the supports. But by that point, half that year had gone. Yeah. And also I completely disconnected. Also, I just realised law isn't sexy, law isn't for me. No. Do you know what I mean? And I was sitting in the lecture halls, and I had a good friend there, and I was immediately going back to when I was in school, and I'd be looking around, maybe trying to, just being a little bastard, just distracting and stuff. So I didn't go back for second year. But what happened in the meantime was this really strange thing happened was, because I'm a very open person, and I had put up on. And also, when you're diagnosed with ADHD, I think, I can't speak, but I suppose when you're a kid, you're going to grow up with the knowledge you have it, but when you're an adult and you've suddenly been diagnosed with it, you're like recontextualising the previous decades of your life. So it was a huge emotional kind of process that I went through. And because I was very wild when I was younger and I did a lot of crazy things, you're like, was that because of ADHD? And all that kind of stuff. And
so how did it affect you going back a few years, if you go back? So you were saying you found out when you were 38, and you're trying to do the law degree, that you found that, right, I can't really put the focus into studying stuff, and it kind of reminds you of school. So what was it actually like for you when you were in school, going back those years?
See, I think, I was speaking to somebody about this the other day. I can't remember what I was like as an ADHD kid. Yeah. Like, of course, I can remember what I'm like as an ADHD adult going back 10 or 15 years, but I can't remember feeling like the way I feel as an adult now with all of this kind of...
But were you able to put focus into study? Were you able to do homework? Were you able to put focus in class when you were in school?
I think so. I think so. I mean, like, from my recollection, I think up until a certain point in school, I did pretty well with exams until I just got to the point where I suppose this is when I hit 15 and my own personal problems really kind of hit. I think, and I don't know if this would be a controversial way of things, I think a lot of people will say that ADHD, the clinicians will say it's chemical, so that's there. I think myself that the ADHD is a reaction to the trauma that we were speaking about, because I also have OCD.
Okay.
And I battled really, really badly with that when that was after I finished my short films back in when I was in my mid to late 20s. And this was horrific. I mean, this was horrific. Completely overtook my entire life to the point where I had almost lost hope. I mean, so the thing with the OCD is the more you do, the more you give in to the compulsion, the worse it gets. But I didn't have the knowledge. So I wasn't armed with knowledge at the time. And I do think that I had that for a lot of my life. And that was horrific. I mean, that would be the biggest battle I think I have ever faced. We'll say certainly in terms of mental health. So I went to a counsellor, amazing counsellor, Kevin McCann, and he operated from this thing called Gestalt therapy. And many, many, many people will tell you that, again, also that OCD is chemical.
Yeah.
But with the Gestalt model, they'll tell you it's something else. So, I mean, I don't want to go into two things of specifics or anything in terms of the source of the trauma. But basically, if you look it up, I'm sure people will see it online. But basically what I took away from it, and again, I wasn't conscious of it at the time, was the OCD, I think, was also a reaction to the trauma. That's more or less in a roundabout way, really, what the counsellor was saying basically was that a lot of it was down to rejection.
Yeah.
So I believe certainly that the OCD was a reaction to trauma. And I think probably the ADHD was as well, to be honest. Yeah. That's my own belief, and probably a lot of clinicians would challenge me on that. You know?
Do you want to talk about the traumas?
Yeah.
Is that
I think the trauma
about?
is the key thing to everything, is what I realised.
Yeah.
Was so I think I was 38, sat down, was watching my the TED Talk with some actor who I love. Was talking about, I think he was basically talking about trauma. But I knew none of this about him, and something within me, this is, well, late 2018, just before I started with the counselling. So something within me clicked, and I was watching the TED Talk, and so what he was saying, it was like I was watching his, it was like I was watching my own story and his. No, there were differences in terms of aspects of what he went through, and I broke down crying.
Yeah.
And I had this moment, something within me, it was like these floodgates were opened. And I was like, this is what it is. So I suppose basically, because I'm gay, so that would be, I suppose that would be at the source of it, but I'll explain in greater detail. So I always knew that I was gay. And this was the 80s, which makes me feel really fucking old. The fucking 80s. But anyway, that was the 80s. So of course at the time, the whole gay thing back in the 80s was, look, I mean, it was just the beginning of the AIDS crisis. So, I mean, there was the whole thing of basically, I think, of AIDS being the gay man's disease, and I mean, it was still, homosexuality was still legal here up until, was it 93, I think it was. So it was a huge taboo thing. But it's amazing how, even when you're a little kid at 4 or 5, 6 or 7, you feel that it's a kind of a forbidden taboo thing. And I can still key in with that. Yeah. So I grew up hearing all the negative connotations about, like, I mean, I remember, it was always kind of subliminally communicated to me that it was wrong. I mean, I remember an incident where somebody would have been saying to me about Rock Hudson. I don't know if you know Rock Hudson would have been a famous actor back in Hollywood's golden age. But he was gay, and he was closeted gay for, I don't know if he ever came out, but he ended up dying of AIDS. He was one of the first famous people to die of AIDS. And I think it maybe came out after that he was gay. No, I was 6 or 7 years old, and I had somebody there telling me about this thing with Rock Hudson and he's gay. And I was very self-aware back then because I knew I was gay back then as well. And then speculating as to, this guy who co-starred with Rock Hudson in this TV show, I wonder if he was gay. And I'm 6 or 7 and I'm listening to this. And things like, just things like that in general.
So was it a lot of negative stuff? So
constant, yeah. It was always negative.
Around being gay, you're getting all these negative...
always.
All the time, and I think this was all building up inside your own subconscious. And
absolutely, it was always that. And there were also...
Do you think it made it harder for you to accept that you were gay then?
I think it probably did. And I think for myself, for years, I tried to even kind of deny it to myself, even though I knew it. But I think what I came away with that realization that I made was that there would have been other things that happened. I probably told you one or two of them before. That I think all of that kind of came from, it definitely traumatized me. There's certain stuff that I can't go into here because, again, I'm very conscious of people can't really speak for themselves and certain things, so I'm very conscientious like that. But there would have been, I mean, like the stuff I outlined there, but there would have been more severe stuff as well.
Yeah.
No.
How did you learn to deal with that stuff?
I don't think.
Or is this stuff that you were only starting to?
Only starting. I don't think I did deal with it. I think I didn't even. I don't think I even processed it. I obviously didn't because I only started processing it. Again, at that point of late 2018.
Yeah, because obviously you're going to get a lot of people that could be watching this that are going through those same patterns and emotions and feelings and hearing all this negative stuff that you went through years ago. They could be going through it at this very moment in time.
Absolutely, yeah.
And like, what would you say to someone like that? Like, or what would you even say to your past self if you could say something to yourself back then?
It's gas because one thing. I remember when I went to the council about the OCD, because the OCD would have come from that as well. I mean, there was one particular source whereby I think the trauma was caused. And again, I can't go too in depth because people have to speak for themselves and stuff like that. And I'm not out to attack or blame anybody, but I think what it is the course of the trauma. The trauma came from rejection. So it's a tricky one. I mean, anytime I think of, I have certain memories of stuff that I would have experienced that I believe was because of that back then. That still plays around in my head. One in particular. And what I'd be very keen to put across as well to people is that just in case people if they feel that they're victims of trauma, but they feel, my trauma isn't a specific type of thing that caused it. I mean, I was never sexually abused, but I still consider myself a victim of trauma. So what I experienced wasn't, we'll say, illicit or anything like that, but I still do consider myself a victim of trauma, and that's what I'd be very keen to put across to everybody. That it's not just that kind of treatment, even though that is obviously horrific, but there are other things that can traumatize people as well. So I think for anybody, I think that's a very key thing to communicate, especially I think there's maybe a slight tendency for people to think that because the marriage equality thing has been passed that, it's okay now. But it's not. I mean, what I experienced as a kid, like you said, there's going to be loads of people experiencing that.
Definitely. No matter what you go through, there's always going to be some other people going through it as well. So
I think for me, in my dealing with it, in terms of my journey, and I went back to even my counselling for the OCD many years ago, was that, and this is where I get emotional because I really keyed in with this last week because now I have the time to, is that when I think of the acting, because I did many some crazy shit altogether, which we probably won't do. I am constantly mindful of the kid. So it's the kid who experienced it. It was the kid who was traumatized. So because the kid was traumatized, the kid never got a chance to develop in the way that a kid should be able to develop to become a well-adjusted adult. So when I feel, well, because I still deal with traumatic memories and traumatic feelings, but I am always mindful to what I visualize myself doing is I'm minding the kid. So once I hit 15, 20, 25, whatever, so when I was being very, very aggressive, when I was being very, very volatile, when I was self-harming, when I took the overdoses, when I was into drugs, all that stuff, that wasn't, in a way, physically it was an adult, but inside it was a kid. So it was a frightened, traumatized, rejected kid.
It was the pain of the child, so was it?
But I didn't know.
Yeah.
So I wasn't connected in. So I suppose as you get older, and I'm very introspective, and you work on yourself, you become aware of that. But I didn't know it at the time. So I think to say to anybody who's going through it, I think is to just be very aware that I'm sure these services were available when I was younger. But I was in Tralee, small town, and I suppose I wasn't thinking in terms of that. Just for anybody who's going through it, in that you have loads of supports, like you have the Gay Project here in Cork. I'm sure any county will have their own support network.
Yeah.
You have counsellors, you have, what's the... I always forget something really important. What's the name of the mental health thing for kids here in Cork? There's a mental health service like for counselling and stuff like that for
Jigsaw, that one?
Jigsaw, I think it is, yeah. And Pieta House as well,
Pieta
and stuff
House,
like that. And also I think there is the Gay Project here in Cork, which they're doing a lot of work, and they're very inclusive, and they're very, very open. And I think just for people, and you have the things like the Life Centre, like I was telling you about a while ago. Like the Life Centre takes on early school leavers, and they're absolutely amazing. So there are services there, but I think as well for anybody who's going through that, I mean, when you're going through it, of course, I suppose even though in the greater scheme of things, you probably are aware that you're not the only one, but you still do feel like the only one.
Yeah.
I think... It's gas because you're getting kind of emotional talking about it, but you think back and you feel like you have all this swirling emotion inside you because of it, because they're new discoveries. I think nobody should have to go through what I went through or feel what I felt or have memories like I have and will always have. So it's the thing of, I think also it's incumbent upon adults to be nurturing to the kids and to be understanding and empathetic and not project their shit and their problems onto the kids, because a kid is a kid.
Yeah,
Kid has no power. Kid is a kid, and a kid is giving themselves over to adults in general, you know. An adult is an adult. An adult has developed more than a kid, and it's incumbent upon the adults to support the kid, not be projecting their shit onto the kid. No disrespect when I say that. Because a kid is a kid. A kid is still forming. An adolescent is still forming. And I'm of the great belief that, look, I was 38 and I came to the realisation, okay, John, you're a victim of trauma. And because I think society kind of tells you that you don't say that you're a victim, you don't state that you're a victim. You can do that in an empowering way. Yeah. I am a victim of trauma. I can say that now without, and it's not self-pity, it's not looking for pity, because I'm well able to look after myself, but that is what I am. And I think it's the trauma of certain things which I haven't really spoken about, and it's also the trauma of the rejection. But those other things would have been because of the rejection.
Yeah.
There would have been other things as well, not from that one source, but it was primarily one source for me. I think trauma is such a big thing that affects so many people. I think many people who are suffering with mental health issues, addiction issues, stuff like that. Like, I can't speak for them, obviously, but I would imagine that the bulk of that is done to some form of trauma.
Yeah.
That probably happened in your younger life. And when something happens to you when you're a kid, you're not going to know how to deal with that.
No,
you're just going to react as a kid from what it is. And of course that in most cases then forms the adolescent you become and the adult you become. You know. So
what would you say to kind of any parents or people like that or what would you say to parents to look out for in their kids to kind of recognise as their trauma? It could have been from bullying, could be something from school, could be something that they're going through that the parents may not know about. That you think there'd be some different behavioural actions or issues?
I can't think regards. I think one thing that I will say, and this is one thing I would implore any parents to do, is that like none of us are perfect, and parents make mistakes as well. But some parents do not empathise with their kids. Most do, but they don't. If you're the kind of person that has, say, homophobia or internalized homophobia or just general discomfort with things like that, or not even necessarily with sexuality, but with other things, do not test the child's masculinity. If it's a girl, do not test the child based on conditional norms of what's feminine. Don't try and get them to be any more masculine or any more feminine so as it's less, so as you don't have to deal with the fact that you know your child is gay.
Yeah.
That's one. I think that to me, and that's something I haven't often heard, but I think that happens.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really important. That, I mean, to be right, that can fuck a child up, and an adolescent, and be understanding, be empathetic. Do not try and enforce your own. Do not try and impose your own issues or your own fears onto your child because they are something that you fear or that you're not comfortable with. Stand back and ask yourself why you feel that way.
Yeah.
Because that's about the adult. That's got nothing to do with the kid.
Yeah.
That happens a lot, and I think that's a lot of it, and that's one thing that needs to be looked at and needs to be spoken about, because quite honestly, most parents are very supportive. Some parents would say they're supportive, but they're not, and a lot, they are very supportive. That's a key thing. That's a key thing that needs to be addressed. In terms of signs, I think maybe, I don't know, I can't even remember what I would have been. I suppose maybe if they were withdrawn, or see, it was tricky with me because also on top of all that, I had the ADHD as well. So, like,
how would you recognize? Like, was there specific ways you were acting, as in terms of having the ADHD? Like, how would someone recognize if someone had ADHD or even the OCD?
Well, with OCD, my thing with OCD is this really bizarre thing where, and I still have it and I always will, but I mean, have total control and totally manage my OCD now, so that's fine, so it's not even an issue. But my thing was, when it got really, really bad, was I had this thing where I had this fear of contaminating my eyes. So if something went into my eyes, whether it be water from when you're washing your hands, I would be worried that something went in, okay? And then I get incredibly anxious, and then I start washing out my eyes, and then it only gets worse because it's a snowball effect.
Yeah.
This all goes back to that rejection, that trauma. I have no doubt about that. So the signs, I'm sure there were signs, but I'm not really conscious of them. I think I definitely would have gotten more anxious and more reacted to things in a more kind of volatile way.
Because I'm just kind of thinking in terms that if someone's kind of feeling a certain way and they don't know what it is, and maybe they're thinking maybe it's just me, there's just something wrong with me, kind of thing. So I'm just trying to recognize, is there kind of specific patterns or something like that people may notice if they do have OCD or ADHD?
I think if you're doing something and you feel it's like the compulsion, I suppose. If you feel compelled to do something that in your head that you know it doesn't make sense, that rationally there's no need to do that, and if you keep going back to do it, and then those feelings of anxiety just start to increase, then that's an ADHD thing or an OCD thing. That for me was another way, I think, of me dealing with stuff that I wasn't keying in with. Regarding the ADHD, there's ADHD and there's ADD, and I'm still not entirely sure about the ADD, but I have ADHD, so mine is what I always say that mine is extra sexy because I've got fucking hyperactivity as well on top of it. So I'm like clinically hyperactive. With the, well, I suppose if anybody's watching the video and they see me now, they'll be like, yeah, okay, that's one of the signs, because I'm very, like, even when I'm sitting still, my mind is I'm still fundamentally moving. Yeah. Like really, really
Would
fast.
you find that you fidget a lot as well, or is it just your mind is constantly going?
It's the mind is constantly going. So I think with ADHD, very impulsive. Very, very, very impulsive. So I am. No, I mean, again, maybe I'm better at reining it in now because I have the knowledge that I have it. So they say people with ADHD, and this is statistically, I think that there's a significant rate of addiction issues. And I definitely have addictive tendencies. So again, when you have ADHD, you're constantly looking for high. You're constantly wanting to be gratified. Because everything is in the extremes. So I think you're prone to taking risks, which I've done. It's the impulsiveness. You do things in a big way. And there can be the addiction issue. Now, I know I was into drugs years ago. That was about a year and a half. And it's gas because with the realizations I've made about myself in the past year and a half and kind of re-examining that. So I would have said to you for a long, long time when I was into drugs, no, I wasn't addicted at all. It was just, do you know what I mean? It was because I'm a naturally curious person anyway. I thought, okay, that's it. But then I was thinking about how, like, every weekend I went out, I had to get my stuff. But I just use the lingo that I was using at the time. It's not that I'm not condoning it or anything. I'll have to use the lingo that I used at the time. So I was going to get my yolks, the ecstasy. Yeah. But like, I'd work all week and I'd be fine. And I'd go out on a Saturday night, but I have to get them, right? And if I didn't get them, I would get moody and I'd come home and I'd be like, fuck it. Do you know what I mean? So you're kind of thinking, okay, is that not a form of addiction if you're reliant upon it?
If you have to have them,
And I remember, and the more I tell this story to people, the more I realise how bad it was. The night of I can't remember if it was my 24th or my 25th birthday. So we were going down to one of the nightclubs in Tralee, and I knew I was going to get my yolks. I'll get my ecstasy tablet. And I'm not making a joke about it. No, it's just, you know what I mean. This is. So okay, that was fine. And one of the lads said to me, "Oh, do you want acid?" Fucking acid. I'm not going near acid because I heard the horror stories. But I was like, no, I'm not going near. So went the way down and took the pills off my head. I remember walking out of the nightclub and somebody handing me a little tab. Just put the tab under my tongue. Acid. Which 2 hours before I was like, no. But sure, it was off my head and I do anything and I take anything. So I took it. Remember walking up the road to a house party, waiting for the effect, nothing. Went into the house party. This is bizarre. And because it was my birthday, I'm not sure it was a free line of Coke or free line of Speed, I can't remember. Took it. This was after taking ecstasy, more than one, and acid within the space of 2 or 3 hours. Thought nothing of it. And then somebody offered me, so I got the Coke or whatever it was Coke or Speed, I can't remember, for my birthday. And then I took poppers. I remember, I didn't see any danger in it at the time. I remember sitting in a room at the end of the night, and I think I'd taken so much that everything just cancelled each other out. So that was fine. Got up, was back in work on Monday, was talking to one of the lads in work, and I told her, well, and she looked at me. She said, "John," she goes, "Are you fucking mad?" But I was like, what? So, because I told her what I'd done on Saturday night and how much I'd taken. She's like, "John, do you realise you're lucky to be alive after that?" And I was like, again, it just didn't. It didn't. And I was like, no, it was, oh really? Kind of a thing. Told my best friend, same response. She goes, "Are you out of your mind?" She goes, "That you could have been fucking killed. That's insane." And it's again but again, thought nothing of it. But again, with all of these realizations I made about myself, and you're looking back, so you do have to re-examine things. And I've told people that story even now, and they're looking at me like, John, that's fucking insane. That's crazy. That's crazy. And I was there, I would, when I was on drugs.
Do you think that was because of all the pain that you went through and the trauma and everything, that you just didn't care?
I at the time I would have said no, and I would have just said it's because I'm curious. One thing I think I had a tendency to do without realising it was, after the ADHD diagnosis, I found myself attributing a lot of my former, we'll say, unstable behaviours to the ADHD. But in retrospect, I don't think that was the case. I think maybe some of it was, but I think the bulk of it was because of the trauma. So I think in retrospect, it probably was, because I liked who I was. Yeah. I didn't have to give a fuck about anything when I was off my head and drugs. And when you're, do you know what I mean? So I think, and this is a new realisation. I mean, for years I would have said, initially I would have said a lot of it was down to ADHD, which I don't believe it was. Maybe slight bits of it, but I think the bulk of it was down to trauma. But again, it was a case of, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know my place in the world. I certainly didn't fucking love myself. And the weird thing is, I'm super confident. I'm incredibly self-assured. I'm an incredibly confident person. People always say it. So I always thought confidence and self-esteem were the same thing, but the self-esteem was zero. So I had all this confidence. I go into the rooms, people are like, oh yeah, great, I'm very good socially. But there was no self-love and there was no fucking self-esteem, and it was 38 years. And it was because of trauma. It was because I am a victim of trauma. And I'm sure, I think a lot of the things were simple. I was incredibly, I took an overdose that was when I came out, when I was 19 or 20. I was always very volatile. I think as well, I was an incredibly angry person. And this is a key thing that I think really should be spoken about, and it might help someone. Because when you grow up and you're rejected, you feel that you're being rejected for who you are, and you've experienced things that have traumatized you. What's being communicated to you is that you're shit, and that you're not worth it, and that you're blah blah blah. Do you know, all that kind of stuff? So I felt that. And because I grew up around anger, because I was often around anger when I was a kid, so things I think tend to be learned behaviours. If you are around that, that's going to become your default, especially in dealing with your own trauma. So I was incredibly angry, I was incredibly volatile. I never remember, after I took that first overdose when I was 19 or 20, I was working in a factory at the time, and I had this terrible sense of entitlement that because I survived this, that I can do whatever the fuck I want. And I can say whatever the fuck I want, and I can be as volatile as I want. And kind of like, I've experienced that, I'm in pain, so I deserve to be aggressive. And I was like, that was probably the most volatile I ever was. And I realised then that, and the thing with the anger issues went right up until my 30s. And you then realise, even with anger, do you know, this thing that people are predisposed to being fiery because maybe their mother was, or their father was, or their uncle, or their grandfather, whatever. It's not. I don't believe that's a genetic thing. I think it's a learned thing. I think mine was learned. I think it was environmental. I think it was learned. What I've learned to do, in order to love myself and value myself, is to, and I get it takes a lot of work, but I'm getting better at it, I'm unlearning a lot. So I'm unlearning anger, which is very easy for me to go into, and fieriness is very easy for me to go into. So I'm unlearning that, and I'm coming at things from a more, I suppose, kind of a measurable perspective.
So this is all part of your own journey of personal development and self-discovery.
Well, I think if you can unlearn it, if you can unlearn, we'll say, something that is harmful to you and potentially harmful to others, if you can unlearn that, it also means that you learned it in the first place. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So I believe all of that I went through, all of those, we'll say, less desirable attributes in terms of the anger and the volatility, that was all learned. But also I think for anybody who goes through that journey as well, it's very, very important that they realise that they're not bad people, even though they've done like you may have done unstable things and crazy things, that you're not bad people, that they're good people, and that you learn to love yourself, because that's the key to so many things. And I think loads of people suffer with that, is that it's a case of they don't love themselves.
Yeah, self-acceptance and accepting the journey they've been on and accepting all the things they went through.
Absolutely. And I mean, it came like all of this stuff. I mean, it's amazing, all these realizations that I've made since that realization of the trauma thing. And I'm working with an amazing counsellor, Samantha O'Sullivan, we're almost like friends at this point. Like, do you know what I mean? It just clicks. I mean, sometimes you click with the counsellor, sometimes you don't. I mean, I click with Samantha, and she's amazing. And she's been a great kind of a sounding board for me and a support for me as I go on this journey.
So would you believe that that's a really important element as well for anybody that is going through any of this stuff, to find their support?
Absolutely.
Get out, get a counsellor, get someone that they can actually that can guide them moving forward.
Samantha told me in my first session, she said she was taken aback because I went in knowing what my issue was.
Yeah.
I suppose a lot of people, they don't. And she's commended me on being quite enlightened in terms of that. But I think it's I believe it's, if I have a question that I need to ask myself about the way I'm dealing with things or the way I'm approaching things, I will go in and I will put this out there and I'll discuss it with Samantha, and then I'll come away with my answer as to whether or not I'm doing it the right way. And I kind of keep, because I don't, it's gas, but a lot of people who know me, probably watching this and listening to this, will not even be aware of a lot of the stuff I'm even talking about. They're like, Jesus, that kind of stuff. Because for a long time I wouldn't speak about it. I was aware, certainly with the OCD stuff. And I think recently as well, I think I realised that maybe I had some kind of an eating disorder as well, which also would have been self-image, but that would have been back to that stuff as well. So, I mean, support is key. And for anybody, I think, listen, if I can find something within myself and realise, okay, that's what it was, anybody can do it. But it's so important as well. I mean, there's so many. I was listening to Graham McCormack's thing the other day, and I was listening to Sean's thing, and I think if you listen to the 3 stories, and actually, of course, being aware of your own story, if you listen to all those stories, a lot of those stories really are very, very similar stories. And I think that the more people kind of own their stories and tell their stories, it's very empowering for other people coming up. Yeah. And that's one thing
I think it's not only empowering for other people, but even for yourself. As part of self-healing, putting yourself out there, putting your story out there, telling people about it. I think that is a way of self-healing as well. It
is, and I'll tell you as well, because I suppose, like, when I don't know if it's a generation thing, I don't know if it still exists, but certainly when I was growing up, there's the whole toxic masculinity thing of that it's subliminally being told to you that you don't speak about things, you don't tell your story, and that's all bollocks, of course. One thing I realised when I did I don't know if I spoke this is me going off on a tangent. I probably jumped ahead now about 20 minutes ago. One thing I realised in terms of stories and the power of stories within myself was when I was diagnosed with the ADHD. No, I probably leapt ahead and I did. I had a thing up on Facebook and I put it up. So Colette Sheridan, who's an amazing journalist who usually would do pieces on my shows when I was working in theatre, she saw the thing on Facebook and she said, do you want to do an interview about your ADHD? I said, yeah, not a bother. But I had to wait to get the formal diagnosis. So when I got the diagnosis, I did the interview, and I think went into the Irish Times. I think it's one of the big papers. It is, but I don't think I realised how big it was at the time. But I didn't think much of it. So I woke up the next morning and got a phone call from Colette. And she said, Ryan Tubridy's people saw the Times yesterday. And they wanted to know if to do an interview. And I was like, yeah, not a bother. So it was like a few weeks later, I was down in the studios in RTE. I was talking to Ryan Tubridy. I think maybe I should have been at college that morning. I was a bastard for that. So I was down in, I went down to the studio in RTE, so he was up in Dublin, I would have been down here. And then there was a producer from Today with Maureen Dahi, saw me going in, and I think she said she heard a trailer for the Tubridy thing, and she wanted to know if I'd do an interview again. So this was all about the ADHD. I went on Tubridy's thing. Look, there was a big response to the paper. I went into the one with Tubridy, and like, I'd only gotten out of bed about an hour before. That went really well. There was a big response to that. And then I did the Today with Maureen Dahi one, so it was me and a clinician, and there was a great response to that. But the weird thing was, I didn't seek any of it. I didn't go looking for any of those interviews. They all came to me. Apparently it was my approach to my story is that I saw it as a gift rather than a curse, the ADHD, which I still do. It has challenges, but everybody, neurotypical or not neurotypical, are going to have challenges from the way their brains function. And I still, to this day, get messages from people for advice in terms of where do I go to get an adult diagnosis, or I think I have it. So my big takeaway from that was clearly there is something in the way that I'm communicating my story, which in that time was regarding the ADHD, that's resonating with people. So I became like this accidental activist. But then I keyed in with that, especially in the past year and a half. And I was like, okay, if I have this ability whereby people relate to me because of my story or what I'm communicating, and I'd be doing this to help people, I'm all about helping people. There's something to that. Obviously I have something whereby people feel that they can connect with me. So that was my big kind of takeaway from that. And I think once I made the realization about the trauma stuff. So that's very much, which is why I'm doing this interview and why I want to continue maybe public speaking about like the nature of trauma, sexuality, all that kind of stuff. And I'm in the process with another person of setting up an ADHD support group for adults. So I want to, what I've realized about myself in terms of, okay, whatever it is about the way that I communicate it, clearly it's connecting with people, to take that and apply that now consciously to this other thing we've been talking about, which is the trauma, sexuality, the addiction, the eating disorder stuff, I suppose, whatever. And try and help people, because I think even if I when I was listening to Sean's interview and I was listening to Graham's interview, I was thinking that even if I hadn't made my own realizations about myself already, so if I still was in that thing of the way I was, I still would have been very empowered by listening to those two stories and those two interviews. So I think you can, and I was even empowered listening to them with the realizations I made about myself. And I'm very grounded and I'm very stable and very thing now. So there's such value, and also in your own story. So there's such value in owning your story and speaking your truth for yourself, but also it will help others. And we're in an age now, look, the Caroline Flack thing over during the weekend, do you know what I mean? And things like that. And there's a woman I know committed suicide there a few months ago. It's now, I think, even more than ever.
100%.
We need that kind of thing, because with the more advanced society gets in terms of technology and this and that, the more complexities and issues come to the fore, I think. And now you're going into the whole thing of online things, so it's much easier for people to bully people and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And I think as well, I think there are a lot of very hurt adults out there who need healing, but there are also a lot of kids out there who are experiencing what I experienced, or maybe other things, who could very possibly end up becoming like the way I became, because they don't know any better. And I think it's a discussion that needs to continue to be had, And I think people need. No, I'm now at a point where, because I'm so level and grounded and that I don't care about perceptions about my stories when I'm speaking about things like, again, drugs, self-harm, suicide attempts, eating disorders, whatever, because I've taken strength from my story, and I'm doing it to help others.
Using it, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
So I suppose, just to kind of wrap it up, how can people get in touch with you? Or
well, I mean, I suppose, say for instance, like Graham, I'm not doing this thing kind of in an official capacity. That's actually what I want to work my way towards, certainly in terms of public speaking and stuff like that. So I'm kind of in the process of that. Like, I mean, it would be the Facebook thing, really, John Hayes. So, I mean, well, I'm very much, if anybody has any issues and they want anybody to speak to, I'm not going to turn anybody away. Yeah. I'm a normal civvy, like, do you know what I mean? I
can pop the link to your Facebook up on in the show notes anyway on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So and I think then, if anybody, regarding the ADHD thing, then if there is anybody out there who, cause I have a very clear thing on the support group, that if it happens, is that it won't only be for people who've been diagnosed, it's for people who are undodiagnosed and think they have it. Yeah. Because chances are, if you think you have it, you have it, because that's where I was. And if they need any, if they have any questions regarding that, they can either contact me on my Facebook page, John Hayes, or the email address is johnmhayes37 in digits at gmail.com. And that's regarding the ADHD thing. But if anybody just wants to talk in terms of whatever, I mean, if any of what I've spoken about kind of resonates with them, and I do, like I said, I don't have any qualifications in terms of how to direct my story in that way, but I'm in the process of that. I hope to do that. So, but you know, I've lived it. So
cool. We're just done there now, yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't sure. I'm trying to get the key for the fridge as well.
Oh shit, sorry.
You're alright.
Literally just finishing it there now.
Sorry, pop the tape and stuff.
I told you I could talk for fucking Ireland. Like, I'm 5 o'clock, I still be talking.
Well, soon as well.
We wrap it up there. Right, John. Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
So again, guys, thank you so much for taking the time for listening to this episode. And if you found it of value, I would love if you would share it on your social media. Also rate and review the podcast. And give me some feedback. I'd love to know what you actually think of the podcast, so I can work on improving them to be able to add more value to you guys as well. So guys, if you want to check me out on social media, make sure you look up Stephen O'Brien Coaching. And guys, again, thank you so much, and I shall catch you all on the next episode.